Well, hello there. Hey, guess what? We've waited a long time for this. It is time to jump into the book of Mosiah. Why is that so cool? Well, other than the fact that Mosiah, starting really with King Benjamin moving on to, excuse me, his son Mosiah, they are cool indeed, but it's also the first real book beyond the small plates of Nephi, right? Remember, everything we've had up till now, except for the words of Mormon, which is just that little transition bit, have been part of the small plates of Nephi, which are incredibly cool themselves. But so now we are kind of in the meat, or in what will be the largest section of the Book of Mormon itself. Anyways, I digress. What's most important is the words and the messages that they have there for us, not how it's divided up and all that, although I really, as you can tell, enjoy seeing kind of the fingerprints all over it of its authenticity and all that. So today we're going to get a little glimpse into the life of the king of the Nephites and the people of Zarahemla. Remember, there were two people who came together as one, and it's interesting. Again, I guess maybe talking about the fingerprints and what's behind the letters. We're showing up midstream. There were the lost 116 pages, the original, the first portion of translation that the prophet Joseph Smith gave into the hands of his scribe Martin Harris, who wanted to take it and show to his family so that they could have a greater sense of confidence in what he was doing and how he was spending their time and their money. And he was warned against doing this, but he pleaded and persisted and was allowed to do it. And then, of course, that 116 pages, that was a big chunk of translation, was lost. And, at first there was great concern. Oh, wow, what are we going to do? And this was a serious problem. But the Lord had taken care of this from the beginning. And that's why he had the small plates of Nephi prepared, because that perfectly replaced, not duplicated, but replaced the same period of time that was covered by the pages that were lost. And so what happens now, this is when we transition back onto the abridgment. And so we show up really kind of mid-sentence here, because it was what we know from the small plates of Nephi that the King Mosiah the first was the king of the Nephites at the time that the Nephites decided once again, we've got to leave, right? The Lord has warned us, it's time to go. And so they picked up from the land of Nephi and journeyed about 3 weeks to the north, up to the land of Zarahemla, excuse me. And they found the people of Zarahemla, and yay, well, that was King Mosiah the first, right? And all of his account and everything, the details of that were all part of the record that had already been translated in that 116 pages. It was all there, in the same level of detail that we're used to and that we will see here going forward. And it had even transitioned beyond King Mosiah the first into his son, King Benjamin. And in fact, we were most all the way through King Benjamin's reign, and that's the part that got lost. And so now here we are picking up literally, like I say, mid-sentence in King Benjamin at the very end of his reign. And so we get to learn a little bit about how he taught his children and all, but really setting up for the transition from him to his son, King Mosiah II, basically, who will now be King Mosiah II, and really the only King Mosiah that we get to know. King Mosiah I will remain, somewhat of a mystery to us, other than the little bit that we heard from Amalekite at the end of the book of Omni. So, anyways, but this is really neat. It's a neat section, and so it's just a short little chapter. Of course, I'm making it long by all my yappity yapping. Sorry, but so let's get ourselves where we need to be. And sorry, I gotta get there we go. Now we can talk. Okay, so let's read Mosiah chapter 1, verse 1. And now there was no more contention in all the land of Zarahemla. See, like mid-sentence. Among all the people who belonged to King Benjamin, so that King Benjamin had continual peace all the remainder of his days. Now, this was described somewhat, again, like I say, at the end of the book of Omni, and what was described there was that it took King Benjamin and his priests and all of his helpers, all the faculty of his whole soul, right, through much teaching and preaching and begging and pleading and threatening and anything that they could do to get his people to basically walk straight and do the right thing. But they did it. It took years, I'm sure, but they did it, and they got the people to a very good place in terms of they were all there, they were engaged, they were doing the right things. They had gotten rid of, for the most part, the pride and all the garbage that is so commonly present in groups of people like that. And it came to pass that he, King Benjamin, had 3 sons, and he called their names Mosiah, Heloram, and Helaman. And he caused that they should be taught in all the language of his fathers, that thereby they might become men of understanding, that they might know concerning the prophecies which had been spoken by the mouths of their fathers, which were delivered them by the hand of the Lord. So I like this painting here. It shows, King Benjamin teaching his 3 sons, and it probably was very deliberate like that. Hey guys, here's how this works, and this is going to take years to really get good at this. So let's get cracking, because if you don't know how to read this, you're not going to know how to read the scriptures. And if you can't read the scriptures, that's a serious problem. And they knew the importance of being able to read that and study the scriptures. And he also taught them concerning the records which were engraven on the plates of brass, saying, My sons, I would that ye should remember that were it not for these plates which contain these records and these commandments, we must have suffered in ignorance, even at this present time, not knowing the mysteries of God. Now remember, they had firsthand experience with what happens when you don't have the records, because the people of Zarahemla, who they had met and merged with, didn't have the records, and that's exactly what happened. Their language was corrupted. They had no sense of God or any of their spiritual history, right? For it were not possible that our father Lehi could have remembered all these things to have taught them to his children, except it were for the help of these plates. For he, having been taught in the language of the Egyptians, therefore he could read these engravings and teach them to his children, that thereby they could teach them to their children, and so fulfilling the commandments of God, even down to this present time. So that's an interesting thing. He's talking about the plates of brass, right? That's the plates of Laban that Nephi got the hard way, or that maybe Laban let go of the hard way, kind of lost his head over that deal. But you can see there that those were recorded in the language of the Egyptians. And so it was necessary to be able to read that language of the Egyptians to be able to read the plates of brass. It's also an interesting comment that, he's saying, and remember, he had a very complete record of Lehi and Nephi and all of them, right? He didn't have just the small plates that we've got. He has a much larger set of engravings of the history of the descendants of Lehi, and yet he's saying that alone is not enough. And for us, that's an important message as well. As great and miraculous and complete and wonderful as the Book of Mormon is, and we cherish it, it's not enough. We need the Bible as well. We need it all, right? Everything goes together and is necessary to complete the picture. I say unto you, my sons, were it not for these things which have been kept and preserved by the hand of God, that we might read and understand of his mysteries and have his commandments always before our eyes, that even our fathers would have dwindled in unbelief, and we should have been like unto our brethren the Lamanites, who know nothing concerning these things, or even do not believe them when they are taught them, because of the traditions of their fathers, which are not correct. So that's interesting. I like how he says, keeping the commandments always before our eyes, right? And the energy and focus he's putting on teaching these to his children, if we don't have them always before our eyes, if they're just in a book on a shelf and that's it, even if we know that the book's over there, if it's not always in our eyes, we're going to dwindle, right? And I think we need to apply this individually to our own lives. I'm going to dwindle if I don't constantly keep this before my eyes. And I don't want to dwindle. And I know, I mean, I have had dwindly periods of my life where we're constantly having to relearn things that we've forgotten because we've just, you can't pay attention to everything all at once, right? But we forget things so quickly, especially as we get older. We just need to make it be a constant source in our daily lives in order to keep it fresh and keep it in front of us. Long ago, I heard a quote, the person who does not read is no better off than the person who cannot read. And that is true for general literacy, and it's also extremely true for the scriptures. To say that we have them does us no good if we don't study them regularly, constantly. O my sons, I would that ye should remember that these sayings are true, and also that these records are true. And behold also the plates of Nephi, which contain the records and the sayings of our fathers from the time they left Jerusalem until now, and they are true. And we can know of their surety because we have them before our eyes. So this is interesting. What is he doing here? I mean, it's so easy to gloss over this stuff. He's bearing his testimony to his sons, right, to his children. All we know is they only refer to his sons. He probably had daughters. We don't have any record of them. And I'm sure he taught them all. So that's my guess. He's a good dad. When is the last time and how often do we truly, and it doesn't have to be in any particular, Sunday standing up in front of the church type of format that we talk to our children in this way, but when is the last time that we really let them know that we believe this, that this is true, and shared with them the reasons why we believe that it's true and know that it's true. We need to give them something so that the Spirit can witness to them in ways that they will be able to hold on to of the truthfulness of the words that we are saying to them. When we tell our children, I know that this is true, we want them to get the same shivers that we get of the Spirit saying, it's true. It's true. And if we're not sharing that information with our kids, we're depriving them of an opportunity that I think is super important for them. And now, my sons, I would that ye should remember to search them, the scriptures, diligently, that ye may profit thereby. And I would that ye should keep the commandments of God, that ye may prosper in the land, according to the promises which the Lord made unto our fathers. So that was two separate things, right? Searching the scriptures diligently. When you're searching for something, like I lost my glasses the other day, and I was searching. I flipped over the cushions, I lifted up the blankets, I moved things, and I knew that it was in here, and I just needed to keep looking until I found them because it was important for me to find my glasses. And I finally found my glasses. They were behind the Kleenex. But it took me a lot. Like, why did they end up there? But anyways, I needed to find it. It was important to find it. I didn't stop looking. Well, honestly, I did stop looking. I ran out of time. I just had to be blurry for a while. But I went back when I had more time again. I went back and I continued looking until I found it. Well, do we ever hit the scriptures that same way, where it's like, no, I'm looking for something. I'm pretty sure it's there. I'm going to keep looking until I find it. And even if I don't find it right this minute, I'm going to keep looking until I find it, because it's important for me to find it, right? And when we have questions about the scriptures, if they're right and true and proper questions, we might not find it immediately, but we will. If we keep searching diligently, the Lord will guide us to the answer, both through the scriptures directly, and then He will open up our minds to be able to understand the scriptures better. And I can tell you that this is absolutely true. Just even in this project here that I'm working on, there have been questions that I've had that I wanted to share and talk about in the videos, and it happened once in the Isaiah chapters and once in Nephi's vision of the tree of life, and I didn't understand this thing quite well enough, and it took about a week of searching, and I would say that's getting off easy, just a week, and searching and pondering and praying, literally, all of those, literally. And it finally came to me. And when it came, I knew it. And I knew that the answer came from Heavenly Father. because it was just suddenly there and it was obvious. And as soon as I understood that, then all of these other scriptures made so much more sense, right? It was about the bondage of the people of the old world that Nephi was seeing, and he would refer to them as being in bondage. And what in the world does that mean, bondage? They weren't slaves. They weren't in bondage. Yes, they were. They were in the bondage of ignorance. And when that was finally given to me, I was like, oh, thank you. And it took a week of searching, right? Just like that. And and that's been so meaningful to me to be able to understand that better, right? And there's so much more, right? That was a teeny little one. There's so much more. We've got to search the scriptures with a question, with a focus, trying to find things, turning over the cushions until we found what until either we found it or the Lord has revealed it to us. And many more things did King Benjamin teach his son, which are not written in this book. And it came to pass that after King Benjamin had made an end of teaching his sons, that he waxed old. And he saw that he must very soon go the way of all the earth. Therefore, he thought it expedient that he should confer the kingdom upon one of his sons. So if anyone out there is feeling like, Mom, Dad, your lessons go too long, they're probably looking at this going, I'm waxing old here. Well, can this lesson be over? Yeah. Therefore, he, Benjamin, had Mosiah brought before him, and these are the words which he spake unto him, saying, My son, I would that ye should make a proclamation through all this land among all this people, or the people of Zarahemla and the people of Mosiah. Interesting that he calls them after the name of his father, right? King Mosiah the first, who dwell in the land. So it's interesting to see there at this point, they still kind of feel like two separate people, the people of Zarahemla and the people of Mosiah. And that is so natural. They'd only been together for, maybe a couple decades at this point, a handful of decades. And they were so culturally different, even though at the very core of their history, they both came from Jerusalem, so they had that in common. And yet they had spent 400 years developing different cultures. So interesting that they were still feeling kind of separate. That thereby they may be gathered together. For on the morrow I shall proclaim unto this my people out of mine own mouth that thou art a king and a ruler over this people whom the Lord our God hath given us. And moreover, I shall give this people a name, that thereby they may be distinguished above all the people which the Lord God hath brought out of the land of Jerusalem. And this I do because they have been a diligent people in keeping the commandments of the Lord. So it's interesting, here he is, he's saying a name instead of two names, Zarahemla and Mosiah. He's going to give them a name. Also interesting that he refers to them distinguished above all the people which the Lord God hath brought out of the land of Jerusalem. It's interesting that he doesn't just say out of all of the children of Abraham or of all the children of the earth or whatever. He's kind of being specific there about and acknowledging that they aren't the only children whom the Lord has brought out of the land of Jerusalem. Well, and they, of course, know of the Lamanites, right? There's another group that certainly came with them and have parted from them and who will not be part of this group. But maybe he's aware that there are others. Interesting. And I give unto them a name that shall never be blotted out except it be through transgression. Yea, and moreover, I say unto you, that if this highly favored people of the Lord should fall into transgression and become a wicked and an adulterous people, that the Lord will deliver them up, that thereby they become weak like unto their brethren. And he will no more preserve them by his matchless and marvelous power, as he has hitherto preserved our fathers. For I say unto you, that if he had not extended his arm in the preservation of our fathers, they must have fallen into the hands of the Lamanites and become victims to their hatred, right? So that's interesting, and I love how he does this. He's reminding his children specifically of the times in the recent past and maybe the somewhat further but not distant past where their family, and maybe their grandparents or whatever, their parents and grandparents, have been specifically blessed by miraculous means by the hand of the Lord, right? He's using family examples of the Lord's blessing and mercy and interaction in their lives. And here again, I think that's so important. Our families are all blessed, right? If we're doing anything right, our families are receiving blessings. And as parents, it's our obligation to be aware of those things, write them down, keep track, right? And then share them and remind them. Take these family stories as family heirlooms and share them with our kids, whether it's from just, a year ago, a decade ago, a generation ago, whatever it may be. Keep these memories alive with our kids, because that's an important part. They will cling to those and identify with those, I think, more than just a generic story of some whoever from whenever that they don't have any real connection to. And it came to pass that after King Benjamin had made an end of these sayings to his son, that he gave him charge concerning all the affairs of the kingdom. That's it. Here you go, Mosiah. No pressure. You're king. And moreover, he gave him charge concerning the records which were engraven on the plates of brass, the actual plates of brass, and also the plates of Nephi, the actual plates of Nephi, and also the sword of Laban, and the ball or director, the Liahona, right, which led our fathers through the wilderness, which was prepared by the hand of the Lord, that thereby they might be led every one according to the heed and diligence which they gave unto him. So this is very interesting, because he's basically handing over the relics, the holy relics, and these are super important to them, right? With the ancient Jews, they had the Ark of the Covenant, and what was inside the Ark of the Covenant? There were the tablets with the Ten Commandments, right? There was a pot of manna. There was the staff of Aaron, right, which had started to bud. There's a story about that. There's something else I'm completely forgetting. Anyways, there were these holy relics, and they were super important to the people. They were holy. They were important to the Lord. They were important to the people, and they were symbolic of various different aspects of the covenants that the Lord had made with them as a people, right? And it was important to them that they keep those sacred. And this is a really neat example of the handing over of the Nephite relics from one king to the next king, right? Super, super neat. Also, I like in here how they're very clear. Every word in this was deliberate, right? There are no words in the Book of Mormon that were just casually tossed in there. And so he's referring back to how Lehi, their fathers, were guided by the Liahona, which he doesn't name Liahona, but the ball or the director. But he says, they were led according to the diligence which they gave unto him, the Lord. It wasn't so much about the tool where, the pointer says it's exactly that way, so we have to do what the pointer says. Yeah, they did. But what they really had to do was pay attention to the Lord and what he is saying that they need to do. So tools are good. We need to pay attention to the Lord. Therefore, as they were unfaithful, they did not prosper nor progress in their journey, but were driven back. So he's talking again about his fathers and the Liahona. So when you don't pay attention to the Lord, you're driven back. And incurred the displeasure of God upon them. And therefore they were smitten with famine and sore afflictions to stir them up in remembrance of their duty. And now it came to pass that Mosiah went and did as his father had commanded him, and proclaimed unto all the people who were in the land of Zarahemla, that thereby they might gather themselves together to go up to the temple to hear the words which his father should speak unto them. That was probably a lot of work, I'll bet, although he had to get it done in one day, so hurry up. So that's it for chapter 1 of the book of Mosiah. So let's end up with the question that we started with. Do we teach our children, both by our words and by our example, to search the scriptures diligently, keep the commandments, that we and they may prosper? Do we teach our children? Do we live it so that our actions teach our children, but our words also? So important, so important. Thank you very much, and we will see you back shortly for Mosiah chapter 2. See ya.